On Halloween Day of 2018, Toby Fox, the developer behind the massively successful indie game Undertale, would unveil his newest project, or rather, the first chapter of his newest game, a game which would end up being the spiritual successor to and parallel story to Undertale, that game of course being Deltarune. Originally, Chapter 1 was just going to be a one-off demo for the game, and it wouldn't be released in a chapter-by-chapter basis. 3 years later, though, we ended up getting Deltarune Chapter 2 released as a free update to Chapter 1. This chapter massively expanded on the game and improved it in multiple ways, introducing new, interesting lore, one of the best characters ever in the form of Queen, a developing really wholesome lesbian relationship between Noelle and Susie, as well as some genuinely excellent boss fights. Flash forward a couple of years, and now we finally managed to get Deltarune Chapters 3 and 4, marking the halfway point of the game. These two chapters managed to expand upon the game even more than Chapter 2 did. Tons of new lore has been introduced, the character development has been top-notch, there's even more incredible boss fights, we've got some genuinely incredible and hilarious characters like Tenna, and of course, the main antagonist itself finally showed its face, the Roaring Knight. I genuinely love Deltarune a lot. It is easily in my top 3 games of all time, and there's very little competition. The game basically takes everything that made Undertale so fantastic, the really fun and intuitive gameplay, the memorable and amazing characters, the surprisingly really deep lore, etc., and expands on all of it by a lot. However, beneath the surface of the game, there is a much darker alternative path. One that the game itself desperately tries to dissuade you from doing. One where you, the player, push the game to its limits. One where you are the antagonist. I'm of course talking about the Weird Route. In many ways, the Weird Route, also known as the SNOWGRAVE route, is sort of like the spiritual successor to the Genocide route from Undertale, but while there's a lot of similarities to the Genocide route, there's also a lot of differences to it. Mainly, this route is much more personal and much darker in my opinion. And just like the Genocide route, the game itself tries dissuading you from doing it, but not just that, the character you play as, Chris, also desperately tries to dissuade you from it. While the Genocide route tackled some meta themes with its narrative, the Weird Route takes this up to 11, but instead of focusing on the actions committed playing video games, like killing characters and such, the Weird Route takes a different approach. Instead, it focuses on the impact we, the player, have on the characters in Chris's world, how we can abuse that power and manipulate them into doing unspeakable things. In this video, I plan to give an analysis of the Weird Route, why I believe it works so well, the general events surrounding it, and honestly just give my thoughts on it. I've seen discussion about the Weird Route before, but I don't see a lot of people really delving into why it works as well as it does, and so that's sort of what I plan to do here. And believe me, I did not enjoy getting footage for this video a lot of the the times because I may love Deltarune, but yeah, everything about this route is designed to make you feel as awful and evil as possible, without quite sacrificing gameplay for it, unlike the genocide route from Undertale. Also, please keep in mind, this is my first sort of analysis kind of video that isn't on things like boss fights or missions in a game or level design or anything, so please, if I mess up at some points or I seem a little shaky, bear with me. I want to get two things out of the way first before we start though. First, some people who are subscribed to the channel or watched the previous video might be wondering when part 2 of Dark Souls 2's boss ranking is going to be coming out. The answer is, I don't know, but don't worry, I haven't stopped working on it, I just wanted to do this at the same time. So don't worry about the part 2 getting cancelled, it's not cancelled at all. And second is my social media. I have a Discord server as well as an account on Blue Sky. You can go and follow me there if you want to. I have the invite link for the Discord as well as my Blue Sky account on screen right now, and they'll be in the description too. But now that that's out of the way, it's time to begin our analysis. Why Deltarune's Weird Route is a masterpiece of psychological horror, in my opinion. Chapter 2, one of the most nostalgic parts of the game for me. The part of the game where I truly began to fall in love with Deltarune. The part of the game where it started to feel like it was more than just a game. The part of the game where I really started to feel like this was something greater than I initially thought. Now, for the first part of Chapter 2 set in the cyber field, you can't really initiate the weird route just yet. And plus, you'll still have your encounters like the really silly encounter with the sweet cap and cakes, all the shenanigans going down with Queen, you get the idea. It's still your standard silly, goofy, lighthearted early game Deltarune adventure. You've still got the upbeat atmosphere, you've still got the really fun characters, you've still got all that. There's no indication given by the game that any alternate route is possible at this point. However, after the roller coaster fight against Birdly, that changes. You see, after you split off from the rest of the fun gang after leaving the trash zone, you're all on your own for like a few minutes. Then you'll end up finding Noelle. The whole "don't let him find me" scene plays out, which is one of my absolute favorite scenes in the game, seriously. This kind of stuff is the reason I love Queen as a character. It's amazing. And then after a little bit of dialogue, you and Noelle team up and she joins the party. She's only a temporary party member, meaning she goes away after a bit of time, but still. Chris and Noelle actually used to be really close childhood friends, however, after her older sister Des went missing/died, Noelle and Chris kinda drifted apart. So even though there's no animosity or anything, at first things are a bit awkward. In the normal route though, things between you and Noelle go really smooth. And at the end of the chapter, you and her legitimately become friends again. There are no hints given to you by the game that there's any kind of alternate path just yet, but this is where you can initiate the weird route. If you try to backtrack after Noelle joins the party, she'll tell you that she's pretty sure it's the wrong way. For most people, this is a pretty clear signal that, hey, maybe this isn't the correct way to go. Maybe you should try going to the right and pushing forward through the city. However, backtracking is necessary to initiate the weird route. So, after Noelle mentions that she doesn't think it's the right way, you have to still keep going. In the areas right before meeting up with Noelle, there's now a bunch of enemies, the first of which being a Virovirokun. When you initiate the battle, Noelle is completely and utterly confused. So, you and Virovirokun have to explain how battles work to her, and it's really funny. And honestly, I personally would probably end up feeling the exact same way as she did if this happened to me. Something to note though is what kind of party member Noelle is. You see, Noelle is sort of an ice mage. She's got access to a few spells such as Sleep Mist and such, but one of them in particular is Ice Shock. It's a purely offensive spell, so you may decide to test it out in battle and see how much damage it does. So as you just saw there, when an enemy is defeated using Ice Shock, they become completely frozen. Normally when an enemy is defeated, there's a little animation that plays of them running away, but with Ice Shock, they're completely frozen in place. And their frozen body remains outside of the battlefield too. This, combined with Noelle's horrified facial expression after it's cast, already signals to the player that maybe there might be an alternate path, and that maybe, just maybe, there might be something a little darker going on with Noelle's potential magic abilities. But we'll get to that when we get there. For now, you just have to go backtrack through the garbage dump and eliminate all the enemies with Ice Shock. This is one of the major ways that the Weird Route differentiates itself from the Genocide Route in Undertale. In the Genocide Route in Undertale, all you had to do was just grind out all the enemies in each area until you killed them all. Whereas with the Weird Route, you have to kill them in a specific way, and you have to make a specific series of choices to initiate the route. You might have also noticed that when Noelle froze the Viru-Kun, there was a strange, high-pitched sound effect that played. This sound effect plays pretty much every single time you progress the Weird Route, and it becomes sort of haunting the more and more you hear it. Aside from that though, nothing's really creepy right off the bat about the route. The upbeat music is still there, there's still a really cheery atmosphere, and so far, everything seems normal except, wait, what happened to all the cars? Normally there should be plenty of them on the streets in the background, and right here. I mean, we have to use the walk button usually to get across streets. Oh well, I guess it doesn't really mean all that much, it's just a minor change as a result of us losing recruits, I'm pretty sure. Jokes aside, this marks the first noticeable change in the game. It's the first sign that, hey, maybe this is impacting a lot more than you thought. Maybe something is just not quite right here, but it's also subtle enough to not be an obvious giveaway. It could easily just as well be explained away by saying, oh, maybe it's just because I didn't spare enough people, so there's not that many people here now. Once you've killed all the enemies in that area, you'll then end up back in the annoying mouse room right past where you first met up with Noelle. On the normal route, you have to do this puzzle and get the mice into the hole. If you try walking past the puzzle, Noelle insists that you have to solve the puzzle and deal with the mice. It's normally a cute little bit of character building for Noelle, but to progress the route, you pretty much have to keep insisting on leaving. Noelle is genuinely caught off guard by this. She asks, Chris, are you really gonna leave me? You're given two options. Sorry, I'll do the puzzle, and proceed. This one singular word will keep appearing in the route. You won't be able to forget it. Noelle thinks to herself, seriously, when did Chris get so bossy? Something important to bring up is that just because Chris is the protagonist of the game, that doesn't mean that we are Chris. In fact, Chris and the soul are both separate in-universe entities. The soul is what we actually control, and when we play as Chris, we're actually playing as the soul possessing Chris. And the fact that Noelle's genuinely so caught off guard by our choice to keep going signals that this is not something Chris would normally want to do. We are going against what Chris wants here, and that's a theme that's gonna keep coming up throughout the route. After skipping the puzzle, you'll have to keep advancing through the Cyber City and freezing all the enemies as you were before. You may also notice the weird lack of any Addisons. Usually there's a ton of them in this area. Even if what they're advertising is usually completely useless, they're a cute little bit of world building and make for some good interactions. So them being completely absent makes the whole place feel so much more off. And arguably, the bright and upbeat music still playing here makes it even more unsettling. Your next significant interaction with Noelle on this route is at the advertisement of a giant Ferris wheel. Noelle talks about how much she likes it, and then she asks you if Susie would want to ride with her. This is normally a pretty cute interaction, but on the weird route you're given an option, I will ride with you. Noelle shrugs this off as Chris playing another prank like when they were kids, and it gives a little bit more characterization to Chris. But then, you get another option. Noelle will ride with me. This confuses Noelle a lot. She's shocked by just how insistent you are, but she tries to play it off. She dismisses it as some kind of prank, which, to be fair, wouldn't be out of character for Chris, as they are described to be a bit of a gremlin. But notice how the response is in first person. This is not a coincidence. And this is gonna happen again later on. The fact that it's in first person too clearly highlights the fact that Chris and the player are separate, and it just adds even more to the whole off-script, unnerving atmosphere. But you'll finally find another Addison near this area, so it seems like things might be back to normal. He asks you the usual question of if you want a pair of dating shoes, and well, Noelle says that you're just friends. Normally, you'd just say, oh, we're just friends, and the interaction would end like that. However, to progress the weird route, you have to say we're something else. This completely shocks Noelle, and it's made very clear that she has never felt the same way. At first, it just seems like nothing's changed until you try to walk away. You then make Noelle put on the freeze ring. The way the music completely cuts out after that is absolutely bone-chilling. The once bustling, densely populated city filled with so much life. This once vibrant, exciting place is now empty, completely deserted. Nobody's around anywhere. It's dead silent. There's nobody else. Just you and Noelle, and what you just did to get the ring. There's no distracting from how off things are now. The game has fully gone off script, and everything just feels so wrong. Then we have to do the lightning switch puzzle down south of the Ferris wheel advertisement. Normally, Chris holds down one switch so Noelle can cross, but this time Noelle decides to be the one to hold down the switch. But while we're walking through, while she's holding the switch down, you can see her legs shift a little bit for a second. And then, once you both get across, she thinks to herself about what just happened. Even in her own mind, Noelle is not safe from the player, as we, the player, can hear her every single thought. No matter where she goes, there's no escaping us, and so we reaffirm that it's natural for her to think this way. The music returns, but it's not the way it's supposed to be. It's off-pitch, it's slow, and every note feels like it just sort of stumbles into the next one. It has such an uncanny, bizarre atmosphere to it. It's like the game itself is realizing what you've just done. It's realizing what your intentions are. The game is trying to pretend everything's alright, but it can't hide the fact that we are doing something deeply wrong. This is a route we were not meant to find. And keep in mind, everything that led up to this point has been your choice. There were no hints provided to you up until now that this route existed. No, you deliberately sought this route out for yourself. And one of the most disturbing additions is that now, after the music slows down, every single enemy you find runs away from you. Normally, when the enemies notice you, they charge towards you and engage a battle. But now that you've attained the freeze ring, the enemies are terrified of you, because they know that they will die if they enter a fight. They won't be able to run away if the fight begins. They are doomed the second the battle menu shows up. The lack of any cars, the fact that the enemies are so sparsely spread out now too, it really hammers home the fact that you are killing everything. There are no cars on the road now, which makes it much easier to enter the dumpster room where you find the moss. However, there'll be a little familiar voice waiting for you inside the dumpster if you go there. That's right, Spamton G. Spamton is found here this time around, and he plays a much different role from his role in the normal route. Here, he directly assists you on your massacre by telling you how many enemies there are left to kill. This is already a neat little callback to the genocide route from Undertale with how the save points would tell you the amount of enemies left. However, it's also a little creepy because it implies that Spamton has been keeping track of how many people you've killed, like he was banking on the opportunity of you killing absolutely everybody. Spamton himself is already a pretty weird and kinda creepy guy, so this makes him even more unsettling for me. We then have to go to the next room past the different roads, where we once again encounter an annoying mouse room. We push Noelle to proceed through the puzzle again, but, well, there's a laser blocking the way. Yet despite this, we still keep telling her to proceed, over and over again. We can see Noelle visibly becoming scared as we keep telling her to proceed and forcing Chris closer to her. Noelle is forced to freeze the puzzle over in order to avoid being electrocuted. She then tries to justify our repeated commands towards her as us just trying to make her stronger. But she hasn't realized yet that this is the player acting, not Chris. And Chris, her childhood best friend, does not want this. It might seem strange that everything seems exclusive to Noelle in the weird route, but I think I know why. It's because out of all the party members we have in the entire game, Noelle is by far the most timid, non-confrontational one. Possibly even more than Ralsei. Plus, she trusts Chris as she's been close with them for a long time, which means she's the easiest target for our manipulation and our control. When we enter the third annoying mouse room, Noelle insists this time that she do the puzzle herself. Despite how horribly we've been treating Noelle, she still tries to see the good in what we're doing. She still tries to make excuses for it all. She still tries to justify it. There's no way she can accept the situation for what it is. And it feels so hard to watch, and it feels so awful because, well, it just feels so viscerally real to me. It's one thing in a genocide route in Undertale to kill a bunch of monsters and such, but it feels absolutely evil, forcing this naturally sweet, compassionate girl to do all of this. And the fact that she ends the monologue by asking us if we should go find some more enemies to freeze is absolutely horrific. It shows that our manipulation of Noelle is working, and now we've begun to reprogram who she is as a person. She's starting to grow emotionally detached and numb to it all. All the battles are just the same. Defend, ice shock, over and over again. The same monotonous cycle. And keep in mind, you still have every single opportunity available to abort the route, and really, there's no incentive to continue doing the route. The gameplay, while not being quite bad per se, is objectively a lesser experience than if you were to just abort the route. You miss out on a lot of content if you do the weird route. And not to mention, every single interaction with Noelle in this route is meant to make you feel as guilty as possible for pursuing it. Yet despite there being no reason to continue the route, we still choose to do it. And that path leads us to massacring the entire Cyber City. And once all the enemies have been frozen, it's time to go back to Spamton. The Thorn Ring, the final ring we have to acquire for the route. The Thorn Ring reduces the TP cost of Noelle's ice magic, but as a result, it also causes her to bleed as she wears it, the thorns digging into her flesh, causing her to gradually lose HP. It's really disturbing in my opinion. By this point, we're literally willing to harm her physically instead of just mentally for our own means. There is, of course, a lot of symbolism that one could derive from it being the Thorn Ring, such as maybe its resemblance to the Crown of Thorns, or perhaps it being emblematic of the toxic relationship the player has sort of entered with Noelle given the romantic implications from earlier, or an assertion of control over Noelle. We have to progress to where we normally encounter Birdley for his second fight, except the interaction here is very, very different from what it is normally. Everything about this encounter is bone-chilling. The music that mimics the rhythm of a heart beating, the complete lack of any flavor text or dialogue, and also the fact that Birdley realizes for once that Noelle might be in serious danger, and even though he acts all condescending and stuff normally, when he realizes that Noelle is being threatened currently, he completely drops the act. It gives a little bit of characterization for him, showing that despite everything, he still does genuinely care about Noelle. And noticing his complete lack of his usual condescending grin during the fight, instead being replaced with a completely serious facial expression, just makes it even more unsettling. That's not even including the fact that Noelle didn't even recognize him as her friend at first. Instead, she just assumed he was another enemy and asked us if we should freeze him. This shows just how much we've broken Noelle down by this point. Before all of this, Noelle was the kind of person that wouldn't even hurt a fly, but now we've reprogrammed her. You might notice in the fight too that in Noelle's magic menu there's one new spell that's been unlocked by the Thorn Ring, SNOWGRAVE. It's the only time we see the SNOWGRAVE spell available. It costs your full TP meter and its description just says one word: fatal. It's the only spell in the entire game described as being fatal, and it's also the last step in Chapter 2 to continue the route. You'll have to keep defending and grazing bullets in order to get your TP meter up to the max, and then use SNOWGRAVE. Even though she pleads for us to stop and claims that she doesn't know the SNOWGRAVE spell, she clearly does, and we have to keep selecting it over and over again. We're left alone in the alleyway. No music or ambience, just silence. It's only us and what we just did. The fact that Noelle kept pleading for us to stop and claiming that she didn't know the SNOWGRAVE spell too implies that she knew what was going to happen if we kept forcing her to use it. But eventually, she was no longer able to resist our demands. Everything about this scene is so chilling. The way the music completely cuts out, Noelle's eyes going completely blank, the way she just sort of levitates in the air as though she's possessed. Everything about it just feels so viscerally wrong. From there, an otherwise inaccessible path opens, one that ends with a manhole that takes you straight to the Queen's mansion. Upon exiting the manhole, you'll be right at the entrance to the mansion alongside Susie and Ralsei. When you reunite with them, they're utterly confused as to where you even were during all that time. And even though she denies it, Susie is noticeably concerned about Chris. And she also notices that Chris seems a bit off from usual, which more than anything is probably a result of them being in shock after what we just did to Noelle, their childhood best friend. Then Ralsei teases Susie a bit, and all three of you enter into the mansion. Something is immediately off about this place. Rule's card, who is normally sort of the mid-boss of the mansion, is instead petrified right outside the cafe. The fact that he's already petrified already signals just how long we were separated from the main group, and additionally, the music is different. Instead of the usual, almost Scooby-Doo-esque soundtrack that plays during this part of the game, there's instead a slowed-down version of Spamton's theme. Talking to a nearby NPC reveals that, apparently, because all of the butlers have become trapped in the cafe, something weird has taken over the mansion. And if you try to enter the basement where you do the whole questline to help Spamton get into the Neo robot, which then results in the Spamton Neo boss fight, a familiar voice once again greets you from the other side of the door. Going over to the art gallery area reveals that all the paintings of Queen have had Spamton's face plastered all over them. The entire mansion is devoid of all the goofy encounters and silly moments from the normal route, instead being replaced with a bunch of things called peepus. It's described as an invasive species of freshwater clam, and it's implied to be one of the products Spamton was selling when he was still a salesman. And when you reach Noelle's room, Susie decides to go in by herself. Chris and Ralsei decide to stay behind, but Chris is apparently frozen, just kind of standing there, not moving. A few awkward seconds pass by, and then Susie comes back out, refusing to talk about what happened in there. But it's implied it was probably romantic in some way. Then once we reach Queen at the rooftop, she talks about how the night has taken its leave and how she wants to create more dark fountains to spread the dark world in the library, etc., etc. But then the speech alters as she mentions that Noelle is in no condition to assist her. Additionally, she talks about how Birdley was nowhere to be found despite how hard she looked. She then assumes her Giga Queen form inside her mech. It seems like there's going to be an altered version of the usual boss fight, except no. Ralsei tells her about what will happen if she opens more dark fountains, and she just gives up. There's no fight. For a character as determined as Queen is, there's something genuinely sad about seeing her completely destitute and hopeless, just giving up. Especially when taking into consideration the fact that Queen never had any malicious intent. Even though she clearly was a villain here, her motivation was just to try and make all the Lightners happy. She just happened to be doing it with her ego taking place of her brain. But after that, Susie decides to go visit Noelle again, Ralsei stays behind to talk to the Queen, and so Chris has to go and seal the Dark Fountain by themselves. Spamton Neo shows up. A boss which is normally the secret boss of Chapter 2's normal route ends up becoming the last boss of the chapter on the weird route. Except this time, it's just Chris, no other party members. Additionally, from Spamton's dialogue here, he seems genuinely furious that we're trying to seal the fountain. There's nothing goofy or comedic about his dialogue here, he seems genuinely outraged. One of the lines that sort of gets to me here is that, "I should have known you would have used my ring for evil. Oh wait, that's why I sold it to you." Additionally, Spamton also calls us out for killing Birdly, but in his own weird sort of way. He says, and I quote, "You think making frozen chicken with your side chick is gonna let you drink up that sweet, sweet freedom sauce?" All the implications of the stuff Spamton says here is just really, really weird and really, really unsettling. And like before, anytime he brings up Noelle, he always just refers to her as a hoochie mama. When you get him to low enough HP though, something unique happens exclusive to this version of the fight. We are alone, trapped in a battle that we cannot win. Chris tries calling for help, but it doesn't work. Nobody else can hear them. Spamton mocks us during this time. He tells us that we are all alone. He tells us to keep screaming our lost friends' name out into the abyss. He tells us that we lost it all when we tried to see too far. Obviously, this dialogue is unnerving, but there's also something really sad about it because, more than anything else, Spamton is projecting on Chris. Projecting the fact that he lost everything when his business fell. Projecting that all of his friends abandoned him and left him to rot. But eventually, we, the player, decide to call for help. Or rather, whisper the name of someone familiar to us. Noelle responds to our command hastily, immediately sprinting directly towards us just as we've trained her to do. And just like how we've taught her, she freezes the enemy once again. Now that the fountain is sealed, the entire cyberworld has turned back into just the library's computer lab. Everything seems like it's back to normal in the light world. However, something's off. Birdly isn't moving, and he isn't waking up either. No matter what we do, he just stays there, dead asleep, seemingly unable to wake up. Susie remarks after Noelle leaves that things just don't feel normal. Something just feels wrong about all of this. Back at the castle town, Queen remarks just how low the population density here is. None of the Swatchlings or any recruits from Chapter 2 will even show up here. Queen decides to go to her room, which hasn't been built yet, and there's a solemn, somber atmosphere around the area. If we go to the jail and try to talk to the Spade King, he refuses to talk to us, saying, "You left them behind, didn't you? Just like you left us." There's one last interaction on the weird route for this chapter, and it happens right after Noelle visits her father at the hospital. We use used her to freeze enemies so much by this point that Ice Shock becomes her default response even in the light world. Even though she currently thinks that everything that happened in the Dark World was just a dream, her immediate response is still to use Ice Shock. The rest of the scene plays out mostly as normal until Noelle leaves the room. The voice described here is the voice of us, the player, ordering Noelle around and telling her what to do. We, the player, reaffirm to Noelle that everything that happened in the cyber world, everything we made her do, was not a dream. It all happened. Because we were separated from the group for so long in the Dark World, Susie has absolutely no idea what we, the player, force Noelle to do. So while Susie has no ability to grasp the horrific irony of what she just said, we, the player, and Chris do. As I've established in this section of the video, this route is absolutely chilling, even from the start. But we've only just gotten started. Chapter 3 was easily the most widely anticipated chapter in Deltarune before its release, and suffice to say, it did not disappoint. It follows a similar structure to the one set up by chapters 1 and 2, but also with a lot of differences. The first chunk of the chapter is broken up into 2 different boards. Each board contains a bunch of battles as well as extended gameplay sections very much inspired by the original Legend of Zelda games. Both boards end with a mini-game called a physical challenge where you have to gain as many points as possible via various tasks. The first one is a restaurant minigame and the second one is a rhythm-based minigame, very clearly taking inspiration from Guitar Hero. The rest of the chapter has a bunch of side content too, and overall, it's a bit of a strange one, but not in a bad way. It's not my number 1 favorite chapter in the game, as I believe Chapter 4 easily holds that title, but I still have a feeling that even in the future, Chapter 3 is gonna be remembered as one of the best in Deltarune. We got some new lore reveals with Ralsei and how the Dark Worlds work, a very unexpected but hilarious poly relationship with Rules Card. Seriously, I was not expecting for Rules Card, of all people, to get into a poly relationship, but Dear God, it was amazing. We've got one of my favorite characters in the game in the form of Tenna, and overall, the whole chapter's just excellent. Chapter 3 itself doesn't have its own weird route, nor does it really have a continuation of the weird route itself from Chapter 2, but the side quest to access its secret boss and the Shadow Mantle heavily ties into the weird route, and atmospherically, it feels very similar, so I will be covering it here. Is this sort of cheating since it's not technically part of the weird route itself? I guess so, but it is heavily related to it, so it does count in my opinion. Initiating the side quest is actually a lot more difficult than it was for Spamton and Jevil, because here you have to get at least an S rank on the first board before you're sent back to the green room. That, or you'll have to have enough points to buy an S rank from the Pippins south of the green room. Each rank has its own reward for getting it, and the S rank in particular has its own private room reserved exclusively for S rank players. When you go to enter it, Chris actually tells Susie and Ralsei to stay behind outside of our input. They both agree, and Chris is completely on their own entering into the S rank room's hallway. The Zapper guarding the door notices you're on the list and welcomes you inside and tells you to enjoy the luxury facilities. Absolute peak luxury, am I right? Yeah, in case you haven't noticed, the S-rank room is not luxurious, it's a complete dump. And honestly, given that this is a Toby Fox game, I'm not sure what else I was expecting. But there is something very important backstage. You might have noticed Ram over to the left, and if you talk to him, he says that Tenna did something with the various boards. He talks about the original game that the boards were built off of. He knows that Chris doesn't just want a line from A to B, Chris wants the freedom to do whatever they want to. So he tells you about the original game backstage and lets you go through. You have to get an odd controller to be able to work the game, and then you're loaded into it. At first, everything's silent. You can hear the sound of the 8-bit waves crashing against the shore. There's no music, none of the enemies do anything when you interact with them. You could end up aimlessly wandering around for minutes at a time trying to figure out what to do, until you happen to find a little something. After you get the sword, that's when all of the enemies start to become aggro on you. You might have also noticed in the top margin that the LV level shows up. If you've played Undertale, you'd know the kind of implications this has, and it's not very good. But for now, you just have to hunt down all of the enemies on the map and kill them. It plays pretty much exactly like the classic 8-bit Zelda games, and honestly I kinda like that. When you reach LV2, that's when you're able to break down bushes, and once you get to LV3, that's when you're able to break cacti, which means now you can access an entirely new portion of the map that wasn't available in the board. Weirdly enough, this section has a cold, bluish tint to it compared to the rest of the map. It's pretty odd, to say the least. Aside from that, though, it's basically the same story. Hunt down all of the enemies in here until you get to LV Max. At LV Max, the music suddenly just cuts out again. Now, once again, it's just you, completely by yourself with the sound of the waves to accompany you. But now you also gain the ability to break down trees. Using this ability, you might try to access a new area off to the west. A message shows up written in black text, which, when read out fully, says, "See you soon." Eventually, you might decide to try and see what's outside of the map that you can explore. You might try to cut down as many trees as you can to see what else is out there. Until eventually, you do end up finding something. From there, the game becomes inaccessible until you complete the second board and get an S rank. I don't think I even have to explain why that's so unsettling. It's just, it gives off creepypasta energy for me. Things aren't immediately unsettling about the minigame. At first it seems even relatively normal even. The suspense and unease builds up more and more as you play the first minigame. The progression of this tension is deliberate and it's slow. Kinda like watching my older YouTube videos. Coming in at number 18 on the list, we have the Great Hollow. This area honestly just makes me sad. It could have been so good. The level design here and the whole layout of the
joystick
level
is a metaphor for
is
penis.
honestly... After that, you'll go through board 2 as you usually would. You know, the one where Rule's card ends up getting into a polyamorous relationship with La Nino and El Nina. Seriously, Rule's card of all people, like seriously. Toby Fox, you are something else. Once again, you'll have to get an S rank on board 2, and side note, but this is really hard for me just because when it comes to the Lightner's Live minigame, I am ridiculously bad at it. I'm just saying, y'all don't see me play Friday Night Funkin' for a reason. After board 2 though, you'll have to go backstage again if you've rolled an S rank, and then you'll begin the second minigame. At first, it plays out pretty much the same as the previous one. However, once you've cleared out all the enemies, that's where things change. We get access to an entirely new portion of the map that wasn't in board 2. Over to the west of the map, there's a message left for us. Go to Northern Light. Following the message's instructions and going to the north of the map will take you to a new area. You'll see a door with the Deltarune symbol on it, although weirdly it seems to have been altered as there's an extra upside-down triangle on it. To be fair though, maybe I'm just overthinking it and it's meant to be a keyhole. Interacting with the door makes you use the ice key to go inside. As if the inspiration from the 2D top-down Zelda games wasn't clear enough, we now have a full-on dungeon. The Ice Palace is just really eerie to me. The music is slow and haunting. The visuals are dark and grimy. Everything just feels like it's a place where you're not supposed to be. It's also the only location in the entire game, to my knowledge, that you can access on a normal route that actually references the weird route. One of the examples is a box of text you can find in one of the rooms that says, "The forbidden path began with ice magic." Just how fitting is it then that we find this in the Ice Palace, of all places? When you've gotten your LV up to its max, you gain access to a new part of the palace. You'll meet a white hooded figure. No matter how many times you attack it, it'll never die. When you leave the room, the hooded figure follows you, and every single time you attack, it shoots a blast of ice out that freezes enemies. You'll have to backtrack through parts of the palace and freeze various enemies along the way to solve switch puzzles, eventually culminating in you freezing this one bluebird to get past it and access a new part of the palace. The symbolism here is very apparent. This white hooded figure is none other than Noelle, and the actions we're taking here is recreating what happened in Chapter 2 on the Weird Route. Freezing the bluebird is a direct parallel to when we force Noelle to cast SNOWGRAVE on Birdley. After that is just a simple Lost Woods style maze. The right path is always marked by the white hooded figure following you through it, so you'll just have to go to the places where the white hooded figure follows you and you'll get to the end of the maze. Eventually, you'll stumble upon yet another locked door. Just like Noelle in the Weird Route, the white hooded figure was used by us to freeze all of the enemies. Just like Noelle in the Weird Route, she was used up. And Chris, our puppet, was used by us to achieve that goal. We were the puppet master pulling the strings, deciding for them where to go and what to say. And just like the white hooded figure and Noelle, Chris was used up by us. The major characters in the Weird Route for us are nothing but toys, objects to be used, things to be exploited for our own benefit. And we do this knowing full well they're essentially powerless to stop us. With that said, our quest for the Shadow Mantle isn't over just yet, because at the end of the chapter before the boss fight with Tenna, there's one more game we have to play. Since Ram isn't originally from the TV world and he doesn't belong here, he's already become half petrified by the time we arrive. Nevertheless, we still continue on anyway. Weirdly enough, the board we found ourselves on bears a striking resemblance to the Cyber City from Chapter 2. We've also got pixelated versions of Susie and Ralsei following us. There's no clear indication on what to do, even after you get the sword. After all, how are you gonna get your LV to go up? There's no enemies here. Right? As it turns out, you have to kill the miniature versions of both Susie and Ralsei. Even though Chris is a very taciturn character who doesn't normally express their emotions all that much, they noticeably flinch upon killing each one. Chris is very clearly not comfortable with what we're doing, but ultimately there's not much they can do to stop us. Now that our LV is at 3, there's nothing stopping us from breaking through the ropes and entering into the next dungeon area. Immediately, this place is really off-putting. The ominous music, the dark, desaturated hue to everything, it just makes you want to turn back. It's a pretty basic dungeon-like area, so there's not really much I have to say about it, but once you reach the end of it, there's an interesting conversation with Tenna. Tenna talks about how he was abandoned by his old partner, Spamton. He says how he was finally about to help Spamton make it big, before he suddenly had to take a phone call. His face went pale, and he ran out of the room. Presumably, this was the same phone call that told Spamton about him being evicted from the Queen's mansion. And Spamton's life fell apart right in front of Tenna's eyes, but Tenna had no idea about any of it, so of course he'd be upset. When Tenna notices Chris right there, he's startled. He starts telling Chris that he's doing exactly what they said, just like the deal they made. What exactly this deal was isn't really confirmed, but it can be speculated and theorized about. All that's left now is the shelter, but Chris isn't too keen on us entering. They try repeatedly to move us away from the shelter, but ultimately, we're still the one in control here, and we press forward. It's dark inside the shelter. It's not clear what exactly is going to be inside until we reach one specific room. And so begins the fight against the first secret boss of Chapter 3, Aram. Aram is by far the most unique Deltarune boss because it doesn't even play as the same genre as the rest of the game's bosses. All of the RPG elements for this fight have basically been thrown out the window, and it plays like a top-down game, sort of in the style of The Legend of Zelda. Interestingly, when it comes to Aram's dialogue, the lines about Chris enjoying this just like they enjoyed yesterday are exclusive to the weird route. This is one of many things that hints at Chris having a darker, sort of more violent impulse side to them. Despite this, it's very evident that this darker, more violent and impulsive side is one that Chris is actively trying to repress. Aram itself is one of the most mysterious characters in Deltarune, if not the most mysterious. We know literally nothing about it. We don't know what it is, why it's here in the game, we don't know what its motives are. It's a complete and total enigma. The boss fight against Aram is really difficult for me. Because it's not a turn-based fight unlike all the others in the game, you have basically no time to formulate a complex strategy. In this fight, you have to be able to think on the fly. Aram will throw bombs, throw fire at you, summon other enemies to move towards you like a game of Pac-Man. It can get very overwhelming. On top of that, all of the attacks are really hard to dodge. The only time you're really even able to heal is when you kill one of the enemy's ARAM summons, and even then, it's only a small chance that they'll drop a heal. The fight gets harder and harder and more hellish as it progresses. Despite this though, and the fact that I think it's probably the weakest out of all the secret bosses, I still really like this fight. It's not perfect, but I think it was pretty creative and it's really fun. Plus, after you keep attempting to beat the boss more and more, you'll eventually learn its full moveset and come out on top. Somehow, even though it shouldn't even be feasibly possible, the miniature version of Chris is able to leave the confines of the game. Now we have nothing to control, but, just like how the player has done so far, Chris can also break the fourth wall of this game. They can enter into the game, and with that, we have now acquired the Shadow Mantle. Now that we have the Shadow Mantle, we stand a full fighting chance against the true secret boss of Chapter 3, which needs no introduction. This secret boss absolutely steals the show once it shows up, so you know what? Might as well show you myself. That's right, after literal years and years of theorizing about its identity, the Roaring Knight itself finally shows its face right at the end of Chapter 3. Normally, this fight is just a scripted death, and under normal circumstances, it's practically unwinnable because every attack does enough damage to one-shot your party members. However, if this is a second playthrough, Gaster gives you unique dialogue upon defeat, telling you that your loss here is all but guaranteed, but still giving you the option to go back and try again. And if you have the Shadow Mantle, then you'll get a full boss fight out of this. The Shadow Mantle gives you considerable defense against the Knight's attacks, allowing you to take more than just one hit. However, it can only be equipped on one party member at a time, which means that when you choose the party member to equip it with, you have to formulate an entire strategy just around that party member for the fight. Personally, I'd recommend choosing Susie to equip the Shadow Mantle because she has by far the highest damage output and health pool of the group. Even with all that though, this fight is still not easy at all. I honestly consider the Roaring Knight to be one of the hardest bosses Toby Fox has ever made. Not necessarily the hardest, I still believe that Sans from Undertale holds that title, but still, it's definitely up there. The fight itself is actually really well designed though. I really like the increase in difficulty, and I think they handled it really well. All the odds are stacked against you with this fight. But persistence is the key here, and the more and more you try, the more and more you learn the moves. The moves are still really difficult to avoid. They're still adrenaline pumping and tight. But it's with perseverance that you're able to eventually overcome the knight. And Susie's speech during this boss fight hits extra hard with that fact. The music is an absolute banger, seriously. Black Knife is one of the best songs ever composed by Toby Fox, and you cannot change my mind on that. The visuals, such as the arena and the dark fountain in the background, are absolutely stunning. The knight's design is just awesome. And overall, this is my favorite boss fight, not just in Deltarune, but in Undertale too. Toby really cooked hard with this fight. But even if you win after a badass Susie moment, the knight still sneakily downs your whole party, but then, instead of downing Chris, the knight goes up to them and then knights them. This serves as an early indication that Chris and the knight might be collaborating together in some aspects, but that gets expanded upon again in Chapter 4. And speaking of Chapter 4, it's time we move on from the pseudo-weird route of Chapter 3 and into the full-on weird route of Chapter 4. Finally, we've made it to Chapter 4, the newest chapter in the game, the halfway point for the game itself, and by far the longest and most content-packed chapter in the game. Chapter 4 is set in a group of dark worlds inside the town church, however there's an extended light world sequence before it, which is a first for this game. Usually when we get to explore the light world, it's during the epilogue of each chapter. This chapter also marks a significant turning point in the game's story, with us chasing down the Roaring Knight seeking to confront it. The tone shifts from a fairly light-hearted and not very serious endeavor to one that is very, very serious, and the stakes are much, much clearer. We get some amazing character development for Susie and Ralsei, and not to mention, the sequence leading up to the Titan boss fight at the end of the chapter is one of the best sequences I've ever experienced in any game. And that Titan boss fight I just mentioned is one of the best bosses in the game too, seriously. It gives off final boss energy, and it's not even the last boss of the game, it's the halfway boss. Unlike in Chapter 2, the weird route here isn't nearly as involved, however, it is still very disturbing. To the point where it even outdoes Chapter 2 in terms of how disturbing it is. Most of the changes in the weird route are exclusive to the Light World section of the chapter, unlike in Chapter 2. While I could go into detail about every single little change in the route, unfortunately, this video's already getting pretty long and I only have so much time to work with. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to be glossed over, and I apologize for that, but for now, let's get straight to the juicy part of Chapter 4's weird route. That part, of course, being our visit to the Holiday Manor. At first, the Holiday Manor segment is pretty much the same as it is in the normal route. That is at least until we enter Dessa's room to get the code. Chris rips the soul out of their body and wrenches control away from the player as they usually do at this point of the chapter. But it's after ripping the soul out that things start to change. Chris follows this interaction up by throwing us into the gift box as they usually do. The whole vent maze section picks up from there, but instead of going to the basement and shutting off the power, this time we have to go up to Noelle's room. When she says this, she's most likely referring to the trance-like state she was in when we forced her to cast the SNOWGRAVE spell. The only thing she was able to see was just snow. We now know that at some point between chapters 2 and 3, Chris took Birdley to the hospital after we froze him. Not just that, they even went over to Noelle's house and removed the thorn ring from her, telling her that everything was going to be okay. It was all just a dumb joke. Birdley's going to get better. You're going to be alright. This is crucial because not only does it show Chris's genuinely compassionate side, revealing that they really do care a lot about Noelle and even about Birdley, who, let's face it, nobody really likes. But also, this marks the only time in the entire game so far where Chris not only resists our will, but also actively tries to undo everything we've done. Chris doesn't lift a finger in most other circumstances, but here, they are terrified of what we're trying to do to Noelle. They work to undo everything we've done. We're given another choice. Please don't, or once again, proceed. Interestingly, if you select please don't, Chris doesn't actually say anything. This leads me to interpret that this isn't meant as a dialogue choice. It's genuinely Chris trying to communicate with us through the choice box, begging us to please, just don't go through with this. And if this is true, it makes it even more sad what's happening on this route. Chris normally wields a great deal of control over us in the normal route, but in the weird route, they're basically helpless against us. To continue the route, you have to once again say, proceed. But when you make this choice, it doesn't just result in different dialogue, it also teleports the soul into the room. And now that the soul has been isolated but is still in the same room as Chris, who hasn't noticed us there yet, that means it's time for us to repossess our vessel. Despite the soul having been reinserted into their body, Chris musters whatever strength they currently have to cover Noelle's mouth. They fight against us, desperately trying to stop us from continuing this route. They don't want any of this to keep going. They are afraid of what we're going to do. Granted, it is very strongly implied that Chris and the Knight are actively working together. This makes a lot of people view Chris as an evil force of antagonism. But even if Chris is doing something morally dubious by working with the Knight, and even if they're implied to have a darker, more violent side to them, they're still a human. There's more to them than just that. They genuinely care about everyone they have in their life, and even if they're working with the Knight willingly, which is pretty debatable on its own, Chris still knows what true evil is capable of, and they are afraid of us for that exact reason. But ultimately, they are just our puppet, our vessel. We, the soul, the player, are the one in control here. If we've made it this far, we will see things through to the end at all costs. Even if it goes against what Chris wants, even if it endangers the characters, even if it results in extreme trauma for them, we will still continue to proceed. For the first time ever, we can now directly communicate with Noelle. We can assert our presence to her. This is your last chance to abort the route, your last chance to go back, tell her that it's all just a coincidence and it was just a dumb joke. Or you can continue the route more, telling her the truth. That beyond this point, none of your choices really matter. They all lead to the same exact outcome. Once again, we reaffirm to her that the events of Chapter 2 were not a dream. They all happened, and it did snow. Except this time, instead of just telling her, we're actively confirming it for her. After all, we are the same voice from her dream. The sound marking our progression along the route plays once again, and it's now time to re-equip the Thorn Ring. The thorn ring has been put back on Noelle. We've now finally managed to tear away the last piece of defense she had, and now she's fully under our control. She is our property now. This entire scene is honestly the most horrifying scene in both Undertale and Deltarune. It's the perfect example of how to pull off psychological horror without using anything like jump scares. Everything about the scene, the abrupt change in lighting, the loud, blaring soundtrack, the genuine fear and terror expressed by Noelle, all of it just comes together to make one of the most existentially horrifying things I've ever seen in any piece of media. This scene scares me more than most actual horror stuff does. And on top of all of this, there's an element of cosmic horror to it as well, with the player being this outside force, this eldritch entity puppeteering Chris, forcing the thorn ring onto Noelle. Chris never wanted any of this, but now here they are. They've just had to watch us mentally destroy their childhood best friend Noelle right in front of their very eyes. Hell, using their own body to do so. Everything Chris did to try and stop this route from progressing was all for nothing. And they expressed their sorrow and rage in one of the most chilling scenes in the game for me. Chris is usually a very taciturn character who doesn't express their emotions all that much. Their voice, as described by Noelle, is deadpan and mumbly. Their facial expression almost never changes. They barely react to most situations. But here, they are furious with us. They hate us for what we did, and they want us to die. But they're stopped in the middle of their rage by Asgore, and with no options left, they reinsert the soul. What makes this even more tragic is that it doesn't damage us, but it does damage Chris. If you look at their HP bar after that, they'll be at 10 HP out of 20, literally having beaten themselves almost half to death. But after you're kicked out of the Holiday Manor, Susie starts to talk to you a little bit in the rain about what happened. She's not aware of what you and Noelle were talking about, but she's definitely off-put by Noelle's whole demeanor. The rain suddenly stops as the screen gets a reddish hue. You're put into a dialogue box, but there's no text or anything, no options to select from. There's no sound, nothing. It's completely quiet. This scene, kind of like the one before it, is genuinely terrifying to me. Funnily enough, it's for the opposite reasons of the bedroom scene. It's not the loud, blaring noise or panicked feeling that makes me terrified. It's the complete lack of any sound, the abrupt change in the visuals and audio, the bizarre, glitchy text box that just shouldn't be there, Something about this just feels so fundamentally wrong to me. After that, the rest of Chapter 4 pretty much plays the same as normal until you get to the ending. From there, the chapter ends, as a red dot fades into view, having grown significantly larger than the last time we saw it back at the Holiday Manor. The red dot where we put the thorn ring back onto Noelle. I've seen a lot of theories about what the red dot actually means. Some people think it's just blood, but there's another pretty popular theory that when we put the thorn ring back on Noelle, we inserted a piece of the soul into her, and now that piece of the soul is growing, meaning that eventually on the weird route, we may end up taking control of Noelle instead of Chris. If this theory is correct, it makes the weird route even more disturbing and recontextualizes everything that happened up to this point. Not only were we pretty much emotionally and psychologically tormenting Noelle, we were also breaking her down and grooming her to be an obedient vessel to us. And if that's the case, then it makes it undeniably among the darkest alternate paths of any game I've ever played. But looks like we'll find out when Chapter 5 releases in 2026. And as for how the route manages to portray true evil so well and how it manages to make the player feel like a villain, it utilizes the gameplay of the game to its advantage. It makes the gameplay not necessarily unfun, but a significantly lesser experience than the normal route. The steps to activate the weird route are very specific. You have to know what you're doing to find it. There is no stumbling across it by accident. If you choose the route, you have to watch as the character you're manipulating to do it for you is being tortured by your actions, how they're being broken down gradually via your manipulation. The game confronts you with the results of your actions. It makes you want to abort the route. It makes you want to stop and just let the characters be. But the fact that you keep persisting on it is exactly what makes it evil. And so, that's how the weird route perfects true evil. Before I end off the video though, I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching this. I know this is pretty different from my usual form of content because I haven't really made video essays before, but I hope you enjoyed what I had to say. If you have any feedback, be sure to leave it in the comments down below. I also just want to thank everybody for 700 subscribers. I mean, it's honestly mind-blowing to me because, again, when I started this channel, well, pretty much 2 years ago at this point, I just thought I'd make a place to talk about some of my favorite games. I didn't think anybody would actually watch it. but the fact that hundreds of people actually heard what I had to say and liked it enough to subscribe, it's definitely surreal. So, again, thank you everybody for supporting the channel. I apologize this took so long. This took a lot more effort than I thought it was going to at first. Don't worry, part 2 of my boss ranking for Dark Souls 2 will still be coming out, even if I don't know when. But yeah, it's pretty much just me making these videos, so it usually takes a while. Once again, I have a Discord, Blue Sky, as well as a Twitter account I made during this video's editing process. I'll link all 3 of them down in the description below, and, well, I really sincerely hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, then feel free to leave a like or maybe even subscribe. I'd really appreciate it a lot, but it's up to you. You don't have to do anything you don't want to. So, I'll see you all next time.